In this episode, Darrell and I discuss why software estimates never work and why developers are notoriously bad guessing how long things will take. If you don't know who we are, Darrell and I were co-founders of a company called Realbase, which we recently sold for $180 million. I was CTO and Darrell was head of product. So let's jump into today's episode. So this one is a very interesting topic and close to my heart, which is software estimates have never worked and never will. I'm adding that part in there, but I think it holds strong. What are your thoughts, Darrell?
I've never seen it work better than the team could already work. So I talk to a lot of people about this, like the software estimate stuff. Anytime I can bore someone talking about their work, I'll ask them about it. And generally what I find is anyone who says they work also has the proviso that the team was really good. So I speak to people, I'm like, how do you make this work? They're like, oh, well, I had a really good team. Like the team was already good. The estimates they made had nothing to do with it. They were already doing good work. And like the size of the things might change, but if the engineers and the team are good and they've got a good grasp on what they're trying to build, it doesn't matter because they will scope hammer. They'll take things out of the scope. They'll change the way they're building things. And it always sort of falls back to if the team's good, it works, which means software estimates aren't the thing that's working. People saying this is going to take 2 weeks and then it takes 3 weeks. It doesn't matter if you're in a good team. But any other team can estimate things, but they will always be wrong.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about software. And this thing actually came from a new article that DHH wrote on the subject. So he was just talking about how they've obviously never worked on a software estimate. So basically, I guess the way we can define a software estimate is if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, Ken, I need this new feature. It needs to do this." And you can say, how long do you think that's going to take? Now, That's a notoriously bad or hard question, I'd say. I'd even say bad. I would stick with my initial thoughts. Question to ask a software engineer. And I was, again, notoriously bad for this because I know that I can't estimate how long something's going to take. Because until you actually get in there, you don't even know what's involved. You can kind of guess.
Yeah, there's no way.
But if it's new territory that you've never been down before, how are you meant to guess how long it's going to take you? It's almost insulting, to be honest. For me personally, I'm speaking for myself here, but like I've seen this play out so many times where people have said, "How long do you reckon that's going to take?" And I've asked people, like seniors in my team, and I've said, "Hey guys, how long do you reckon that's going to take you to finish?" And then you just hear things, and you're like, "Oh, another week, another 2." Like, okay, cool. 2 weeks roll around. How long? How far? Oh, another 2 weeks. And you're like, So like you write these things down, and I guess this also plays into this whole story points agile conversation.
That's why I did this before.
Yeah.
Fingers up, boys. Everyone put your fingers up. Give us the points.
How many points is that going to take? So we saw the creator of that recently apologize for it, basically, on Twitter.
Walked back his statement. Yeah.
He was like, "I'm so sorry for this because it's created so much pain in the industry." I just think if it's a same thing done over again, you can probably estimate it. Like if it's literally exactly the same page and you copy paste.
Like if you're talking business as usual stuff and it's like, get this thing done that we've done before. Yes, you can estimate that, but what was the fucking point? Like, why did it matter? Why did you need to estimate it? It could have just been like you knew that you could fit 5 of those in. Why did you go and then ask everyone how long they thought it would take? What benefit was it? Because it's such a small thing. Like if it's a really small thing, it'll fit in around other work. So it doesn't really matter to estimate it. And anything big can't be estimated. And I would probably say that if it can be estimated, it's probably not ambitious enough for teams to be focused on thinking about.
That's a pretty good point.
Anything you want to build worth building is going to be very different to what it starts as. You start with an idea. Like I'm just trying to think back to any projects we did. Like how long did we think digital proposals would take? How long did we think like any of the features we ever built would take? They never looked like what we thought they would at the start. They always changed in scope and there was no way in hell you could estimate them. You would end up completely wrong every single time. Mainly because the product would grow as you did it. You'd like, if you stay really agile, not just agile methodology, you are constantly changing it because you're coming up with ideas as you're building it that only became possible because you'd already done something in one way. and you
Yep.
can't estimate that.
Yep. And yeah, I think that's what, and DHH solution of the way they do it in Basecamp is you get a timeline. So throwing estimates out the window doesn't mean there's no timeline to release. There's still definitely a timeline because that's business works that way. Like as an engineer, you can't say, oh, well, I don't know how long it's going to take. Everyone can just wait. Like I've said that for sure because these are that complex features where it's just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like we don't even know what this looks like. In that instance, yeah, sure. But day to day, most of the time, the customers are waiting something like this could be a small feature, could be a bug that needs to be fixed. You know, again, you don't know what that bug entails or how much of the code base needs to change. But what they like to do, and I think this is a good thing, is you give yourself 6 weeks. So you still run on that cycle. They do 6-week cycle, and you just change the scope. So you're still
Just
running
change
for
what
that.
it looks like.
Correct. So you're still doing the work, but you're changing what that looks like. So you may be able to release this feature, but maybe you're dropping things off. Like, for instance, if I just pulled some little project that I just did recently was the video reviewer, and we were running on a tight deadline, and I was like, okay, needs to be done, but maybe we leave off annotation if I can't fit it. And I do that all the time. So I would say, okay, well, I really want this thing to be done. And if I get to the end and I have a couple of days and a couple of hours left, I go, okay, cool, I can now try and add more things back in. But up until that time where I want to release it, I just try and do the bare minimum that needs to get through because I know that in the next cycle I can come through because that's how we operate, agile. You come through and you add it in later or you add it in when it's actually used and you learn from the user because I think that's the most important part. Where estimates are so...
you realize that the things that you wanted to add weren't ever important anyway and then you never add them again. That's also
the feature
fun.
never gets used and you throw it in the bin. So it's one of those things like, yeah, the estimate world is it's so corporate. I think it's where it's just like, you're following a process. And I actually saw this happen and get implemented and just watch the velocity of the team just diminish. Like going from pure agile where nothing really is counted or measured or whatever, and it just gets done. Like it's a constant, you just keep moving. And I understand that's not for everyone. Not everyone can operate like that, but I found that really a good way to work.
Like my take on it and like where it loses touch is that when you're doing things like that and you're saying, well, I just want to get the media reviewer out and it doesn't have annotations, it has comments, you're much closer to the actual job the user wants done. So you can strip things back. As things get like sort of separated between the engineers, the support, and the leaders of the business, what they want isn't defined well and everything gets really muddy and people don't know how to do that. And then they start saying, we need to start estimating this stuff because they don't give the devs the perspective of this is the user problem that we're trying to solve. Like we need to get something done for the user because like say there's a commercial aspect to it and the customer's going to leave in 6 weeks. We need to get something stepped in the right direction for that. Rather than saying like just get this is what we need as a core principle, you get something done in that direction. They try and break it down and do all of the thinking and then end up missing that deadline anyway.
Yeah, and I think
they've just separated vision from getting stuff done.
I think that's a breakdown in actual business and how it's been implemented because you should get your software engineers involved earlier. They should be the ones helping make the decision. That's why I think that whole disconnect between product and actual engineering was kind of, I've seen this being argued in multiple ways on Twitter, but I think it's like a bit of a bad step because sometimes you have people, or most of the time you have people that have no idea about how the actual thing's implemented. And they just come up with features and things that need to be done. And then they ask engineers to just guess how long the thing that they came up with is going to take. So the engineer actually had no input. Like, firstly, is this even a good idea? Like, should you be doing this? Like, think about it in a different way. And like, it's a different way of working. And I guess I've spoken with people before, like, how do you solve problems like this in big business? And I'm like, I don't really know because I think it's the business is just built in a weird way. That's why software or small companies, startups can actually run circles around most big companies because they can do things that the big company can't. The big company has to sit down and have a meeting about it for 6 months, whereas the other ones implemented some shitty version of it, but it works, and then they're iterating on it because they're just listening to the user.
They're running experiments. And I know like a lot of big businesses want to try and get to that way, but especially when estimates are always wrong, when the needs are coming from a sales team or the needs are coming from a support team. There's a commercial aspect to that, which is this will have a net benefit to our new income or a net benefit to retaining income. And then if you can't estimate the time, you can't really estimate the cost. So you can't make a good decision in that space because they're so separate. And instead of you can get the engineers in and they can make a rough guess, but then that's probably going to be wrong. What they really should be doing is running smaller tests of those things. Get the person who you want, you give an engineer the idea and you say, how can we test this in 2 weeks? Rather than saying, here's the big feature that the customer asked for. How can we test that same outcome in a really small scale that you can do in 2 weeks, and then giving them that time frame?
Because you're taking stepping stones, and I think that's how Basecamp operates: one designer, two devs, I think, to work on a feature. And you know that it's not going to be the full feature in 6 weeks. They build massive products, so you can't build it in 6 weeks, but they build pieces of it over time, and then they get those tested. And I think that's the right way to think about it, rather than try and estimate, because the reason you're estimating is because you want to fit blocks into a year or 2 years. We're going to do this by X time, and it's dude, you've by pinning yourself to that release schedule, you've lost out all your agility, right? You're no longer agile. If you're planning that far, you're not agile, because you need to be reacting to things much sooner, so you can actually release software that people want. Because you don't know, the whole world changes. We get AI. Now what? Is that the new thing that people want? Meanwhile,
everything in every business should have changed a lot faster, but they've already planned three quarters, 4 quarters in advance. I really I think it was the CPO of Netflix had the concept of the only quarter that's certain is this one. And then it just he had a grade. I don't know what he called the grades, but it was basically we're certain on this quarter. And then it just gets less and less certain for the next 4 quarters, and they almost always change, and you don't put any level of detail into Q4 away from now. And so he never planned in here's this financial year. He just said from right now, the next quarter, the quarter after, the quarter after. So now the now, next, later thing.
That's really cool.
And that makes way more sense, because then you're you can have theoretical ideas of we think that we'll be doing this in that quarter, but he was you never end up doing that. And if you do end up doing that, it means you haven't been talking to your customers enough, most likely.
Yeah, because you're doing what you think's right. I mean, really, that's the whole point. I think that's the whole point that people miss about Agile. It's just you actually have to talk to your customer, and you actually have to do what, and not just one, but all of them, and kind of formulate what you think's best for them. Obviously, they're not going to give you exactly what they want, but you've got to formulate what that looks like, and then also where you want to go. So it's a big game, and I think you have to have a really strong product leadership team and
just a vision, a core vision and principle, and then you can map those user feedback to this applies to the vision or it doesn't apply to the vision. We're going to do it or we're not going to do it based on those criteria. And that's often lacking as businesses get bigger.
For sure.
And then the only other one I wanted to mention, which makes estimation exponentially harder, is external factors. And this goes for in businesses as they get bigger and they have more management layers. So like I said, separating out leadership and support, those all become external factors because you need information from this person, and the reply time takes 1 day to get a reply. And then the other one is external businesses and parties, which we saw heaps with trying to connect to third parties for various things in the system. And we could never rely on timelines because of that.
Correct. So basically, you can't estimate because of external factors which are outside of your control. So we had to do integrations with other companies in the past, and we'd say, and then customers say, how long is that going to take? You go, well, I've sent the email.
It's going to take me 2 weeks, and I've done it, and I sent it to them. It's now been 6 months, and they haven't replied to my email.
I can write this API in a day, but I need all the information, and that's not coming. So I can't estimate that, and then everyone gets angry. So it's a good fun little...
Which is the same thing as when you ask for clarification from users about things, then you're waiting an hour to 7 days for an email to come back, things like that.
Yep. So software estimates are really fun.
How long did you think V1 of Clipflow would take?
V1 of Clipflow?
Just imagine when you first started, you were I estimate this is going to take me.
Okay, so I thought Clipflow V1 probably, I think I said 8 weeks, 2 months. which we weren't far off, to be honest. We added a lot of stuff. That's the problem, scope creep. That's the biggest
Yep.
killer in estimation, scope creep. So
Yep.
what clip? That's why we like to pin it down to the MVP, which I don't like. I don't love MVP, but minimal functional product. And yeah, so it got boiled down, and then I like to just pin to that and then just get it out, because I think getting something out is so much better than just keep building. So that's why I didn't give it a long thing. I think it was like 4 to 8 weeks. Realistically, it was pretty much that. I think all in all, been going for about 3 months full time.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it was harder to estimate when you're only doing 1 or 2 days a week. But now that it's full time, it's much easier to kind of guess. V2's gone along a lot faster than what I thought it would. And I think I'm notoriously bad at estimating, and that's probably what other people would think, but I usually overestimate on purpose. I usually would you usually see a doubling in what I would say. I'd say, it's going to take...
The most mind-blowing thing is like the engineer who's asked to estimate, they build their own buffer in, and then the product manager builds a buffer in, and then leadership builds a buffer in, and then you still miss the timeline at the end of it.
Yeah, that's if you're not doing a good job. But yeah. I usually overestimate, and then it's the whole thing about under, what's it called? Promising.
Under promise, over deliver.
Over deliver. So yeah, that's what I like to do. I like to under promise, over deliver, and say, it's going to take a couple of months, whereas Clipflow V2 took us a month. So it's much faster than what expected, and then you get it out, and then you get to test it, and then you get to iterate. So there's a whole bunch of features we want to add too, but that will come in another cycle. And you want to do those cycles. You want to go like build hard, market and sell, collect feedback, build hard, and just keep iterating. And we also, like, another thing we used to do that was to keep like estimates and things like this at bay, was building, like, we had multiple products. So we'd go work a big push on one thing and then let it sit for a couple of months and then come back. So we'd cycle through the products like that. That would give it time to like kind of mature, get people used to it, and find the real problems before moving on.
Let the initial waves die down a little bit before you react to it too fast.